Hello, everyone. Good evening from Hong Kong. And I know there are lots of our participants today joining from Thailand. And good to see you all online. On behalf of the International Association of Theatre Critics Hong Kong, my name is Bernice, and I welcome everyone to join our, this is the second online talks that curated and host by our dear friend POV from Thailand, and it's really good to see you all online, and it's really a good opportunity as well for us to know more about the contemporary performing arts in Thailand. And I know everyone, some of you may join our talk last week, and I welcome some new friends for joining us to talk this evening. And we have two beautiful and talented ladies to join us for this event. And I know they are a very experienced theater practitioners and also producers, writers, and critics from Thailand. And I'm really looking forward to hear about their thoughts and also observation and their practices in Thailand, about the theaters, and also in particular after the pandemic. I think we may have a lot of experience to share and also to learn from each other, and I'm really looking forward to learn more from you both. So POV, thank you so much for your help and support to us. And I think you are going to take over the talk. And without further ado, please, POV, this is your turn to introduce our guests and also to host the events for tonight. Thank you so much.
Sure. Thank you. And Sawadee Krap, good evening from Bangkok, Thailand. And once again, on behalf of IATC Thailand, our sincerest gratitude to our IATC Hong Kong colleagues for co-organizing this two online forums with us. And I'm sure that our speakers as well as participants will learn a lot from this, and hopefully this is it's not the beginning, but it may be something that stimulates the relationship between the arts and culture sectors of our two countries in the near future, and we hope to have collaborations for year to come. Okay. As I mentioned before, this is the second part of our online forum. So for those of you who would like to listen to our first forum, I think is it on YouTube yet?
Not yet, but after this talk, and we will put it like in after 2 weeks time. So please stay tuned with our channel and also our Facebook.
Yes, and please also visit IATC-HK Facebook page, like to keep updated with all the activities, and also the IACT Thailand Facebook as well. Okay. Last week we talked about the relationship between tradition and modernity in the practices of contemporary performing arts in Thailand, and we had two speakers, namely Chonprakan Chanreung and Pichet Kranchun. Okay, and today we are taking a different approach, and we have invited two theater makers and also writers and critics to join our forum. And the topic for today is pre and post COVID-19 Thailand's performing arts, political theater from studios to streets and overseas festivals, plus immersive performances. Okay, so that's what we hope to cover in this 90 minutes. I have invited two longtime friends and colleagues. Okay, excuse me, my dog is he's doing this again. I'm sorry. Okay, all right. He will behave.
He just be under the table.
Yes, he's just like under the table trying to get my attention. Okay. He will be on screen at the end of this forum. Okay. Silently. All right. Okay. Let's come back to our political theater. Okay. Two colleagues today. The first one I have known for many years, and we are both writers. She writes for Bangkok Post. I write for The Nation. So we are enemies? No, not really. we are just like writing for different newspapers, and we are both critics. And she's has been part of the IATC Thailand Center like from the beginning, and she's now also writing for other publications, both domestically and also regionally as well. Amitha Amranand ครับผม
Hi, thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you for joining us. And the second one, I think I have known for well, I think it's 20 years this year. Is it? Yes, it's 20 years. Yeah, I've known her for 20 years. Yes, because she was my student. She was an actress in my production of The Tempest. She was Ariel, because she sings very well, but she's not a performer in a musical theater, as you might guess. No, she's a longtime member of B Floor Theater, which is a physical theater company based here in Bangkok, Thailand, and also she's part of a Forward Theater as well. She's a very talented and award-winning performer, as well as director and producer. And most recently, she has taken a few productions of contemporary Thai theaters to festivals overseas. And she is the artistic director of BIPAM, which is Bangkok International Performing Arts Meeting. So please welcome Sasapin Siriwanit.
Hello, good evening.
Hello, good evening. Okay, all right. We'll get back to our questions. So the plan is we'll be on these questions, prepared questions, for about an hour. I should say 52 minutes now, and then we'll open the floor for any questions that any of you may have. But again, if you have any questions right now, you please use the chat box, okay, to direct the questions to us, and then we'll address like your questions later. Okay, I think in the past few decades, I think politics in Thailand has been very exciting. I mean, for lack of a better word, yeah. I remember talking to a colleague in Singapore, and like right after one of the general election in Singapore, and like they got very excited because the opposition party won like 10 seats out of 100 or something, and then they got excited already. And then, wow, I mean, if you compare it to the politics in Thailand as well in Hong Kong, it's worth talking about, and a lot of people around the world have been like interested in it. And of course, theater has been like dealing with politics like in Thailand, like throughout these years and these few decades. So my question is, before the pandemic, okay, or before early 2020, I mean, what roles did political theater or performance in general like play in Thailand? And we keep in mind that Thailand, I mean, according to Wikipedia, was ruled by something that's called constitutional monarchy. Okay, it's a kind of democracy, right? Yes, it's a democracy with monarchy. Okay, and can you provide some examples like of how like political, like performing arts, political dance or theater like play important roles in expressing different political opinions in Thailand? Who wants to start?
I can go first for this question.
Yes, please.
I think we have to say, because you mentioned the word constitution, or the term constitutional monarchy. So I'll give a quick background, just to clarify that, just in case somebody doesn't, I don't know who exactly is in the audience. but I think it's important to be clear that we're not like constitutional monarchies in Europe, for example.
Amitha,
yes,
sorry,
can you hear me?
Yes, it's not really clear. So I think maybe you can be more close to your microphone.
It's at my mouth.
You can try again.
Let me see. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
is it better?
Yes, it is better now.
better.
If you
okay, so I'll just
hold it like this.
put it. Okay, all right. So we're not constitutional monarchies like in Europe, for example, the UK. Given where you can in the UK, in a lot of Europe, those constitutional monarchies, you're free to criticize monarchies, right? You're allowed to say, I'm not pro-monarchy, I think it should be abolished. You're free to say that in Europe. And Japan, maybe, I just learned not too long ago that Japan is not as free as we thought, but I believe it's still freer than Thailand, right? We have, a famously draconian lèse majesté law, which that has been enforced and wielded as a political weapon by the military government, and even more recently the military government, and also by citizens with increasing frequency. I mean, more recently, and the victims of this law have been getting younger and younger. More recently, there's one that's been sent to the youth court, right? Like there's a just less majestic case now in the youth court, for example. We do have elections, but we've long had a very politically powerful military that has staged dozens of coups since the country became constitutional monarchy almost 100 years ago. I think almost it's like 92 years now or something like that. And today they are very much heading the government. Even though the current government came from an election, even then it's still very much ruled by figures from the military. For example, we've had so many constitutions, but the current one that we are under is definitely was written by the military. And of course, it has many clauses, and there are many things in it that would not be considered that are there to undermine democracy, obviously. So that's just a quick background when it comes to our politics and what we mean by, what does our constitutional monarchy look like? And to come back to the question of political theater, I had a bit of an issue with the question simply because I think that we're entering this talk about Thai theater by zooming in only on political theater. And the questions that I have about this question is why? Is it because and in this I mean critics, members of the media, and people who have decision-making power in the theater scene, like in Thailand, like Satsapin, who's the artistic director of IPAM. Is it because we see the state of political theater as the sole or the most important marker of the health of society or of the democracy? Is it because we think that in a politically polarized and contentious time, political theater is the only or the most relevant theater, the only or the most attention-worthy when speaking about Thai theater in the international context? So I want to talk first about what it means before I really answer the question, which is what role. I want to talk about how and in this I mean only critics. We don't have that many theater critics in Thailand, so I'll just say that this is how we more or less define or how we see and approach political theater. Usually, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but later on, what's foremost in our mind when it comes to political theater is works by artists and theater companies that do overtly political work. And by that, I mean, they don't shy away from that label. They don't say, oh, that's not political. Oh, my work is not political. Maybe it touches on some things that's going on in politics right now. You know, there are artists like that, but usually when we think of political theater or artists who do political theater, they usually don't shy from that label of political theater. And they're known for it, and their work often, you know, when it comes to political work, theater work in Thailand, it means, you know, they criticize the government, they reflect on, respond, or react to current political situation, and they address the most current political issues. The companies that do that are like B-Floor Theater, For What Theater, Crescent Moon Theater, Splashing Theater, which is very young, Lan Yim Group, which is even younger than Splashing Theater, and is based in Chiang Mai, so the north of Thailand. These works are usually, when it comes to the forms, these works are usually experimental in forms. And more recently, even though they're overtly political, they often address unspeakable topics that other types of artists, like visual artists, film, TV, and all of that, they usually don't address. And we can come back to why that's the case later. And this type of political theater usually do not attract theater artists, not only attracts this type of work usually doesn't only attract theater critics' attention, and the critics we have in Thailand, theater critics, are pretty politically minded. We're usually generally pretty interested in politics and interested in political work. And but then beyond that is that in the past decade or so, this type of theater also attract media that are not arts media. They are usually political, like alternative political publications that are usually left-leaning. Of course, the left-leaning in Thailand meaning pro-democracy, that kind of thing, and they attract attention of left also in terms of that's media. But then in terms of audience that we see when you go to political shows, we're talking about, you know, well-known political commentators, sometimes political figures, sometimes politicians that, you know, who are pro-democracy, who are more progressive, who are more liberal, that come to, you know, who are well-known figures who come to these shows as well. So in a way, and usually with this type of political theater, they are usually physical theater, B-Floor being the most, I think B-Floor is, you know, the first company that comes to mind. And, you know, movement-based, things like that. And if they're text-based, then they are quite cryptic. They're not, you know, conventional plays. These artists usually don't stage things like, oh, let's do Shakespeare, Shakespeare political plays or historical plays, or let's do Greek. It's not that. They usually sometimes write their own, or sometimes they adapt, but then do some stuff with it, that kind of thing. But they remain cryptic, more cryptic than, you know, hey, we're doing political theater. But then there are also theater companies and artists who don't always do political theater, and more often than not, they don't identify as such. But then occasionally they're not necessarily considered political by us, the critics, and then they also don't receive the kind of media attention or coverage the way left-leaning, overtly political theater, you know, do from political publications or more news-oriented publication. But they do respond and create work that address ongoing social issues. Sometimes those are, you could say they are political somewhat, like, you know, they would address the Me Too movement. They would address things like gender issues, queer issues, LGBTQ issues, that kind of stuff, or disability, war crimes, things that are less maybe focused on Thailand per se. And for example, there's this English-speaking theater company. I'm not sure they still exist right now because, you know, with COVID and everything, sometimes a lot of people just return home, you know, sell everything or quit their jobs or whatever, or lost their jobs, and return to to their home country. So Peel the Limelight, for example, they did things like Death and the Maiden, I Am My Own Wife, How I Learned to Drive, Agnes of God, bent all these issues. And they're not socially or culturally conservative. I don't think they don't talk about that's not how they present themselves, like this is my politics or this is our politics. But then there are, two a big commercial, like Rashid Ali Theater. It's a huge commercial. It's not a company, but it's a space, but it's also funded by a TV company, a TV production company, a huge one. So they do have a lot of money. They usually have stars. They usually do musicals, plays, but very commercial, like attracting the masses and all of that. They definitely, occasionally they do that. They do things that, or they bring things that are popular, like stories that are popular. They adapt books that are popular, but usually more conservative, politically conservative. And usually, it's interesting how we usually don't think of that. Like, of course, sometimes it's pretty clear they're staging certain shows to make a statement, a political statement. But critics don't usually address them as political theater. We kind of just look at them differently and all of that. And or we don't think, oh, if we're going to have a talk about political theater, let's invite someone from that company, or let's invite the director or the writers from those companies. Another one is less commercial, but smaller scale is Dreambox. I don't know, they're definitely more conservative. They definitely adapt novels and things like that from novelists who are known or famously conservative, right? And they do more conventional plays and musicals as well. So they always have political statements through their plays, but we just don't really recognize them as such. And another one that I don't think we critics in Thailand don't think of much as a political theater group is called Natta Theater Troupe. But I think we usually approach their work, this company's work, as a hybrid between traditional and contemporary forms. So we approach them more formally, less as we look, we as interested in their content, or we don't discuss much of it, because even though like they have done really overtly political works, like they've done musicals about democracy leaders in Thailand. They've done work about the October 6th massacre, for example, and those were clear works that address these particular issues, like political issues. But then they also do works that are, and so of course when they come up with those things, we address them as political theater or political theater work. But then they also do a lot of folk traditional forms. And sometimes I think we as critics, and me included, for a long time, we totally neglect how traditional folk theater has always been. How political satire through political theater, folk theater forms. And the thing is, we don't go out and see much folk theater or classical theater to begin with. So we're a bit ignorant of these forms. But then artists like Anatta Theater Troupe and all of that, sometimes they bring stories that for us, we just think of, oh, those are stories from a long time ago. We know, everyone knows those stories, but then sometimes we forget to think about them as a happening political message or being treated as political stories. And the thing is, with folk theater, we don't forget something like Ligay and all of that. They're funny. They're not used. If you're more of an urban, Western educated audience of theater, this is the kind of thing that you're totally not used to, because it's the kind of thing where it just takes forever. Like if you go to a really gay performance, it takes hours and hours. You can leave, you can come back, and you can still understand the story. It's mostly improvised. You have to, it's all singing and dancing, and aesthetically it's garish. It's not very fashionable looking, and all of that. And unlike physical the B-floor theater work, physical theater work in Bangkok, where design-wise it's very beautiful and it attracts, or it's more appealing toward the younger urban crowd. And but a lot of these Likkei stories, I realized when I was watching one of the shows that at the Bangkok Theatre Festival by Amitha Theatre Troupe, it was just like this fun, one of these folk kind of thing. And I was like, oh my God, actually in Thailand, these are the only theaters that we can actually see characters like kings and queens being mocked, you know? And these stories where it's a bit like a lot of plays in the West too, like Shakespeare and like a lot of things like Marivaux or Moliere and all of that, where, you know, the elite, the cultural elites, the upper class are total idiots. They're such fools, while the fools and the servants and all of that around them are the smarter ones. So I think we need to have a look at these things as critics a bit differently and like throw another look at them. Another one is that's not based in Bangkok, because a lot of times when we talk about theater in Thailand, it's very centralized in Bangkok, very focused in Bangkok. It's Makampam Theatre Troupe, which with their work they've done this for 40 something years, maybe 50 years, where they've worked with marginalized communities and youth, you know, ethnic youths and all of these people in usually up north in other parts of Thailand, or sometimes in the south. They're socially aware. Sometimes they go into the political territory. Because the thing is, they cover, and they're not usually covered by anyone. They're usually not covered by media, because partly most of the media is based in Bangkok. And so, but the thing is, when it comes to politics, the urban politics and the rural politics are completely different. And yet, you know, their political concerns are a lot less abstract when you look at their work. And no, but Makampam's when they work with marginalized communities, and of course they look like, you know, community theater kind of things, and they work with people who are not actors. They work with people who are not performers or artists. So the work that comes out, of course, doesn't get the attention of theater critics who are more arts critic rather than in a way, other than journalists who cover community work and, you know, a certain kind of artists. Yeah. And so, but then in a way, these people, and the thing is that the political covering of the political topics here are totally different. I think for Bangkok audience, political theater in Bangkok are very much deal with more abstract issues, deal with what's going on with the government, but we don't, you know, on a day-to-day thing, we don't come into physical contact with the government or their dealings the way, or authorities, unless we're on the streets protesting or something, or we go into, you know, or things like that, or we do actual activism work. But these people who live in villages, who are ethnic minorities, who are in marginalized communities, their contact with authorities, state authorities, police, or whatever, park rangers, it's very immediate and it's very it's very real and it's very concrete. And yeah, so in a way that's very, very different from urban political issues. So I just want to point those things out. And so just to answer the question, I'm sorry, it's taking me a long time, but the roles of political theater, I think it's important that I think because it's I said this earlier, that, you know, theater artists are able to address taboo topics or topics that would get censored elsewhere in other art forms like films and TV and even maybe visual arts. It's because, and so in a way, it's because, you know, we are the smallest. It is a very small theater community. And I think it's important to say that, yes, it's important to recognize that it's the freest because it is the least powerful as well, and the least important to the government and to the masses. We don't have mass audience mostly. And the theater scene is very small. The theater criticism scene is even smaller. And the audience reach is extremely small. So it doesn't have that much power impact in this grand scheme of thing. And I think the sense of proportion needs to be recognized and acknowledged to begin with. So in a way, but in a small way, but
small but not necessarily less powerful way, the political theater has been good, first of all, for the theater scene in general, because it attracts more media attention than others, right? It attracts more interest from not because only of the content, but because of aesthetic reasons, right? And because of its experimental nature. And I'm talking mostly about the first form of political theater that I talked about. And so it has done a lot in terms of media attention and all of that. And in terms of international attention, it has done that for the theater scene in Thailand. And artists who are also activists are naturally formed communities of like-minded people, attracting more audience and contributing in a small way to political activism, right? And reflects the appetite and that in a way you can see the appetite for democracy in Thailand. But I think that one of the most productive and most successful is that it's garnered attention among university students, right? Who are now this current generation or of university students are extremely politically active. And when they see political theater, I think then that's inspiring for them. And I think from my observation, they have been inspired. They have seen like that there is, or at least there's this space where we can be freer, right, to express or to discuss politics. And for those who want to do arts, then there's at least there's this inspiration to pursue to pursue theater, maybe as a profession or as something, as an outlet, or as a way to sort of develop themselves more intellectually and artistically. And yeah. And you said that you want some examples. I think since we're mostly free, we're not subject to censorship the way film and TV are, and definitely we're definitely freer than, let's say, Malaysia or Singapore when it comes to, because those countries, everything has to go through the government, everything has to be approved, theater or not. But there were two incidents before COVID, but the biggest one is เจ้าสาวหมาป่า, which is a play by more an activist group that do theater. And they were amateurs, but they put on a play that they also televised, and of course they got two of the people involved in the play were arrested and were charged with lèse majesté, and they went to jail for it. And there was another one which is called Bang La Merd. Nobody got into, nothing went to court there, but in their second version, somehow the authority got wind, and this was definitely less than a year after the coup in 2014. Somehow the authority got wind of it and said, where's your permission? Where's your authorization to stage this play? And they were like, we have never ever have to do that. And for every performance, there was a military presence there. They were there, two or three military officers were there to film every performance. And they were physically present. They didn't just leave a camera there to be filmed for every performance. And the thing is, I'm not sure if I don't think a lot of people have seen it in the theater.
Well, we watched it online.
Some of it, but not because we were interested, because afterward we were like, oh, what's going on? Let me see why I got into trouble. But Bang La Merd was actually a very, very good production by B Floor. And when the critics did this in 2019, at the end of 2019, the best of decade, I think a few of us chose Bang La Merd as the best, as number one of the decade, as coming to the top of the decade. And the thing was, what's so interesting, because a lot of, like I said before, a lot of political theater in Thailand is physical, and if it's text-based, then it's very cryptic. Like, you kind of have to decode things a little bit. But this one was even though with the military presence, she basically told us, the actor, it's a solo performance with, yes, physical theater stuff as well, but a lot of text, a lot of speaking. And this is the only show I know of so far that addresses the fact that that addresses the less majestic case, the less majestic law openly. You know, there's no code about it. There's no code. There's no, oh, maybe that's what they're talking about. And even with the military presence, she was telling the audience and for the military what exactly happened to her, what exactly the military did to her in the performance. And it was a very well done performance. It was interesting because, you know, since the pandemic, we've had like productions that have been touring, like political productions have been touring. In Bangladesh as a solo show, for some reason has not ever been toured. But because we have this group called Collective Thai Scripts that was collecting and it published 4 or 5 plays in a collection that's for micropolitics. Yes. Even though it's not been invited to be toured anywhere, to be performed anywhere, even though it got international, you know, it got international attention, it's been read. Like I remember it's been read at least by the Singaporean, because the people of Collective Thai Scripts, when they go to different festivals around in different countries, they do bring this along and they try to sell it. And according to them, they have more attention for this book, which is in Thai and in English, abroad rather than in Thailand. And I remember I was part of the panel for wild rice in Singapore, and to talk about like which, you know, we were represented from 3 or 4 different countries in Southeast Asia, and we were supposed to pick which one should we put in the can, which one should every student study, which one should everyone should be toured, and which one should be translated, which play. And we were supposed to pick plays from our own country. And one person from Singapore said, oh, I use you know, that book to teach her students in Singapore, and they love Bangla Mud. So it's not being toured, but it's being read. So which is not a bad thing. And maybe hopefully in the future it will be staged. Perhaps not, maybe not by B-Floor, but perhaps someone will buy a right to stage it somewhere else. So that's my answer. Sorry, that was a long one.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we pretty much covered the first question. So that's like before the pandemic. So now let's move to the pandemic. That is the second question for.
I want to hear from Sasapin about.
Yes,
I think you really covered everything. I was just nodding in agreement to a lot of things you were saying. Yeah. The one thing I would just add, maybe it's that from the perspective of maker, I think how I see the dynamics of how the artists choose to do political or unpolitical thing, and how the audience choose to attend political pieces or not, is the hunger for conversations, which is now changing. I think before pandemic, which also, you know, coincided with the rise of, you know, this, like you said, a thirst for democracy. Before that, I think Thailand was still this country that has long been kind of, you know, calm and nice, and people don't like disagreement. We don't like debates. Everyone wants a good time when they go see theater. They don't need, like, you know, brain stimulating or like hot debate when they go to theater and stuff. And that's why it stayed much more in the more less visible area, these political theaters. Also, these artists were really active because they felt like there's always something to talk about, and that's why they made a lot of works. It's not about in order to get attention, but it's about they really see a lot of things that needs to be spoken of. Despite the number of exposure, the amount of exposure they would get as a consequence of making those productions. But transitioning to the current times, I think with the youth movement, this really opened doors to the new generations coming. And I think this is the age where Thailand is super hungry for conversations and debates, actually. And people want to talk about things, they want to find topics, they want to find spaces and group of people that they can say something about and really get into discussions with. So theater, especially political theaters, become spaces for these conversations. And I think it's become successful, like you said, Amitha, that they are attracting media attention because it's not just about theater goers, but it's about who are talking about this now and where will we go to have these conversations. So it's less about arts and where to do arts, but more about who's talking about what and where do I go in order to engage in this kind of conversation. So I think this is where we are at the moment. Yeah, that's the little thing I wanted to add. Yeah.
Okay. Then maybe this question is for Sasapin to continue. What about the during the pandemic? Okay, and did you see any change in our expression, like freedom of expression or expression of our opinions, like through theater, like during the pandemic when like playhouses were like shut down?
Yeah, of course, space became a problem, and so there could not be regular performances. That's definitely like everywhere else. What was really interesting, and also I think I'm a bit kind of, speaking from my point of view, which I'm very heavily involved with, political theater people and these like kind of left-oriented communities. We know that in order to be relevant in our political voices, we have to be where the things actually happen, which was not anymore in theater, because theater was not happening during COVID times. We went on the streets, or if we didn't go there physically on the streets, we are allies of the activists who are out there. So I would say that we could really feel, I don't know if we saw so much, we did see some things. You definitely saw artists out there on the streets. We have a collective called the Free Arts Group, which is really, led by theater artists, I would say, and theater producers, and also other artists, visual and other disciplines. And then you have this group of activists who are basically artists who wanted to support the movement. So you see artists and activists mingling and becoming one and the same, and really supporting each other in different ways. And sometimes performances becomes, a protest act. A protest act becomes a stage performance. So there was this kind of merging happening in those like years, 2020, 2021. We could really see this, I think. And so I saw that the expression goes to the street now. If we can't do it in the theater, let's go to the street, because we still want to talk about what we don't want it to talk about. Let's do it where we can and where people needed it, which was on the street. As for the issue of freedom of expression, I think it doesn't really change, because the source of the limited freedom of expression was not really COVID, but COVID kind of intensified it in the sense that the government could use this as a big excuse to, kind of sweep over their authority, and then they don't need a lot of, reasoning to really arrest somebody, because you can blame it on health, you can always blame it on social distancing and blah blah blah. So in this way, I think right now the theater maker, although the streets are not super heated as it was in 2020, but there's a sense of this kind of overpowering fear that we don't really know anymore what's going to hit who, what's going to be considered as a threat, what's going to be considered as offended, because it seems now that the government or the authority can take anything they think out of nothing as a threat, and someone would be arrested, even though whatever they did or performed is a completely harmless act. Like, I don't know, making polls on the streets, like how could that be any harmful to anyone? But then these young people got arrested. So also this seeps into the mentality of theater makers today. Just recently there was a production by a young artist, and actually before they staged it, they asked some of us, my colleagues, to help look at the show and ask whether we should censor something That was the question. And we didn't even ask them, but this was the consciousness that came from them, because they knew that they did this one before in their own university, no problem. But when they came outside to the public, this is like one of the first things that comes to their mind. And really, back before the pandemic, we could still know, like, okay, you don't talk about this. If you talk about this, let's change it a bit, then you're okay. Today, we're like, we take days to really discuss like what is okay or not. And to this day, I don't think we can say we know for sure where the threat lies, because it seems to be anything and whatever. So yeah. However, the youth movement has broken the ceiling for new topics of debate that was previously taboo. So now, interestingly, we have theaters who are more openly discussing political issues. We don't shy away from really hitting the core of the issue. I think even the unpolitical theater before pandemic now have been openly even a bit more politically engaging, and nobody is shying away from this anymore. So I think this is kind of the movement or the trend as of now that I see. I will stop there.
All right. Thank you very much. Amitha, would you like to add something? I mean, the effects of the pandemic on the political theater in Thailand?
You're muted. Yeah.
Or rather, freedom of expression in theater, right? I guess since Sathapin talked about the streets and the actual physical theater itself, I'll talk about the online space, because during COVID, how can we not talk about online space when we moved online so readily, so willingly, and adapted so quickly? Theater artists adapted so quickly to the online space that we have to talk about freedom of expression online. And when the lockdown started, March 2020, right? Much of our lives moved online. And the thing was, like, the theater artists did not take a beat. I was like, oh, good, now I'm going to chill. I don't have anything to cover for a while. We'll see. And then I remember, it's not political theater, but it was just like already on Facebook, somebody said, we have a show, first Facebook show ever in Thailand. And I'm like, God, now I have to watch it. And the thing is, so it didn't just move online. When it comes to moving online, it moved onto our screens. So theater moved onto our screens and into our homes, right? Our private spaces. So I felt it was a little invasive, frankly. I felt like I used to go out, can we leave it to Netflix and to my books, so that I don't, so when I'm at home, I'm with my books and with my Netflix and my whatever movies I find online, when it comes to consumption of arts. And in a way, it was exciting. I can't lie, because my life is very online, even before COVID. So, but all these things, these streaming platforms, Zoom, social media, they become sort of a new stage for artists, and on top of other types of performativity and human dramas and interactions that were already online before that, right? And in a way, it was exciting. Yes, people were experimenting. People were experimenting with live, with new tools and all of that. But at the same time, I felt that nobody was taking time to reflect before they respond to the COVID situation or any situation, only to react to the situation and to express themselves. And although later on, of course, there were good online stuff, good hybrid theater stuff from other countries and all of that. And yes, theater artists and critics across the world have benefited from these technologies, like Zoom especially, because new connections that were forged and conversations that were happening and new audiences gained, like this borderless feeling. But I feel, even then, I feel like artists in Thailand were approaching these tools and the online world too uncritically. And at the same time, we zoom out a bit, the Thai society has had not much discussion about the implications of a very online existence on freedom of speech and democracy itself. We like our conversation on this hasn't gone that far. BIPAM did this project actually called Deleted Scenes in Southeast Asia during our 2021. Sorry, I'm part of BIPAM as well. During 2021 BIPAM, I was part of the artistic committee. And this project called Deleted Scenes in Southeast Asia, where we selected 3 scenes from 3 plays from 3 different countries from Southeast Asia that have been censored either by the government, or maybe one was censored a long time ago by the government, and one where it was self-censored. The artist removed that scene himself. And we got to translate, and we translated them into a different language within Southeast Asia, including English. And we staged them and they were directed by directors who are from a different country, from the origins of the plays as well. And I remember a Singaporean critic said in Articulator of Deleted Scenes, there's one sentence that I partly agree with and partly I wasn't, in complete agreement with. Was she said that the internet in some ways is still ungovernable, and hence is the best stage for work that seeks freedom that they were once robbed of. But at the same time, I was like, I don't think the Singaporean play that was censored by Singaporean government could have been staged online by a Singaporean theater company, right? That is government funded, because everything in Singapore is basically government funded, and because it's so strictly monitored, that I don't think if a Singaporean artist wanted to do that online, I don't think that could happen either. And I thought the comment sort of forgot the issues to the source of funding, for example, and the issues of translation as well. And I thought as well that this attempt by BIPAM's, this BIPAM's effort to challenge and deal with censorship and the inevitable censorship that artists are forced to go through via translation. I thought, like, just because we did this program, it doesn't mean it's more free on the internet, right? We're still like, even as BIPAM, we're like, hey, we are giving this platform. It's still not that free, because we're still trying to avoid censorship or government, censorship laws by saying we're going to translate them, right? So the notion of internet as this democratic and free space only takes into consideration the borders that the internet has removed. But I think we too often don't think seriously enough about what it means to live in a world with 0 boundaries, even meaning if the government can come into our spaces, right? That boundaries, what about that boundaries? Even if expression on the internet can evade government control more than other spaces, even in countries like ours, we too often forget that the very real political borders of the countries that we're living in and the laws that we still live under that control our speech on and offline, right? So I think that needs to be looked at. Sometimes we're like, we can talk, or we have what is that? What's that app that was popular for a while where everyone was having conversation on? Clubhouse or something. Right?
Clubhouse, yes.
I'm so excited, but it was just like, well, we don't know who's listening in, right? So the issues, just break this down quickly. The issues that artists weren't thinking about when they were online, I felt like, for example, what it means to not see your audience in the same physical space, and to not be with the audience in the same physical space. What it means to perform live in front of the camera, plus how many unauthorized cameras that you're dealing with. And when the audience don't see each other, what does that do to the conversation and to our behavior online as well? I feel like the dehumanizing effects of online interaction, in which we are not in the presence of the people we are interacting with, wasn't really taken into consideration. So there's this tension between art, which is supposed to humanize us to one another, right? And the internet, which can have such a dehumanizing effect on our communication and the way we relate to one another, was really not considered. We were just so enjoying this connecting with other people so much, and us too, like the critics too, I think. So this whole idea as well of like, and it's of course very exciting when shows were like suddenly having thousands of audience members, right? When they're streamed live or something like that from all over the world. That can be very exciting, but at the same time, even conversations like this. So what does it mean to be recorded and kept, and have our mistakes and our little flaws, we misspeak or something like that, recorded and kept forever somewhere, or put online forever somewhere. Artists have less control of the content they put out in a way. And yes, your work may receive more exposure from the people in other countries, but you're also more exposed in general. And what are the implications of that? So this whole idea of surveillance were not really considered. And again, to what degree is our interactions and information we consume on the internet and social media, I think Josephine touched on this a bit, influence the way artists think and create works, and what has it done to creativity and freedom of thought and other freedoms as well. And also, in the US at least, and I guess maybe in North America, or at least in the English-speaking world, that we are also a part of, even though we're not, in the West or something like that. The effects of, conversation about the effects of social media on mental health, civil, on the civil constructive conversation, and on free speech and on democracy itself have already been discussed and studied and written about. Or, I just recently watched a documentary online on Netflix. I don't remember the name of it, but it's about how the design of social media, the way it mines our attention and the way it mines private information to make money for these platforms, right? For these social media platforms. What does that say about democracy and freedom and our privacy? And the thing is, not to mention how these companies collaborate with governments, now we know, to moderate and censor information, influence what information by whom gets seen more, who gets seen more, who gets seen less, or who don't get to be seen at all. So these things we need to start having conversation about. Just because we're more offline now with theater, those things are still very much, going on. We live these two parallel lives, sort of, that sometimes melt into each other, our online existence and our offline existence. And so I think when we talk about free speech, which it should not be a political and legal issue only that we talk about. We need to talk about free speech culture as well, right? How we can cultivate that on the grassroots level in our own communities, and including in the theater communities. So that's my answer.
I want to add
yes, please.
Something, I think a different angle of how I see democracy, the concept of democracy or democratization during the COVID times, when everything was like shifted online, was not just about the as a political governing system, but democratization in the sense that when everybody has equally had no space and had to go online, that means everybody has a space instead. Everybody could access this virtual online spaces, and they could do things at anywhere, at any point in time, have any audience they want. Of course, the number of works would be different, depending on your number of followers or so and so. But I feel like there's a bit of a leverage of, because the biggest theater in Thailand and the smallest theater company in Thailand now becomes same one Facebook page, for example, on the Facebook as a platform. And so you have the same means. And this I see as a real, the sense of democratization that I felt was also more in this area where everybody has a more or less equal chance of putting things online. So I think this also prepared for the current times that we are in now, that we have a lot of creations, many times very quick creations, big and small. Sometimes we know about it, sometimes we don't. But I have a feeling that in Bangkok, there's a lot of things going on still. And I think this burst came from that time when everyone has felt like they don't need to own a 3,000 seat theater in order to become a creator. Quality or aesthetically what it means, that's another story. But this kind of access is what I saw as the democratizing effects of the online age that we just passed, or maybe still living in its repercussion at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. There's a couple other things that I like to add, especially like during the pandemic. There was adding on to what Sasapin and Amitha have already said. I think when like political like theater like moved like onto the street, and you talked about how like young people, and I think it felt as if like people feel that they can perform. I mean as a means of expression. They don't need to be like trained in like theater conservatory or in acting classes in order to express something like through live performance, right, anywhere. Because at the end of the day, theater, it doesn't require like a building. It just needs a space for performers and audience to be in the same place at the same time. And I think there's one there's one case that political demonstrators staged a mock of the Thai monarchy, and then there were pressed charges, and one of the witnesses that the police summoned was an acting teacher, interestingly, just to and she was asked to give her a so-called like professional comment whether this is an actual like mock of the monarchy. Yes, but then of course like everybody is like everybody has a political opinion. So it's for me, it's by being political, it's interesting that in Thailand sometimes when you say that don't get political, it means that don't get like left wing. Yeah, because or don't get like anti-monarchy or anti-constitutional monarchy. Yeah, but in other words, I want to say that and this is a little different from what Amitha said. Like for me, our ICH intangible cultural heritage cone, the classical mass dance is downright political. Like from the beginning, it is extremely political because it promotes like monarchy. Like from the beginning,
like the versions that are written, right? Like the written versions that are used, the texts that are used are from Rama II, right? That's the most
and Rama the First. The idea of creating this and maintaining this, as the most like highly regarded form of Thai theater is political. To begin with,
right?
And the reason why they keep like staging it like every year and all the time is political. Yeah. So in other words, I think that we have to make sure that if we want to create a truly democratic like society, we have to look at on both sides, and I think you have already touched like on this already.
It's very interesting that somehow we have the society that forms people's political opinion in a way that only when you're left, you're considered political. I think that's it's a very interesting effect of what has been planted in the socialization and education of this society, that there's only one thing that's considered political and kind of like a little bit off, and not the other or the others view.
But because I remember that I was in a meeting at the Ministry of Culture. And we were reading like applications, like nominations for the national artists like a few years ago, and then someone saying that, but let's look at artists who are not political. And what do you mean not political? So I think, and this is important. We will lead to another question. I think during the pandemic, and as Amitha said that everything in Singapore has been like subsidized by the government. In Thailand, when you apply for like subsidy from the government, there's one criteria. There's one sentence that says the content of the work must not be political. Always, right? Yes. So they don't really want a debate. They don't really want like left wing work.
Yeah. No, but I also think this is not that it's a great thing that they only support certain art, but in a way, I feel like true artists don't go asking money from the government.
No, I agree, but I mean, like
Not
in
true.
many countries,
No,
in
not
many
true.
countries, like in many countries, they
No,
don't ask, like artists don't ask for money from the government. In many countries where like arts flourish,
Right,
government give money to artists without them asking.
Right. I mean, but the thing is, even if you have a free country, a liberal democracy, you will eventually run into look at Documenta 15 this year, where people are like, it's censorship, but you are state funded, so they will have the right to ask certain questions of you. People, not the state, corporations too. Don't forget, when it comes to censorship, we can't just talk about state censorship. We have to talk about financial censorship.
Yeah, right. I agree. But I mean, in order for arts to flourish, I mean, like artists have to live like from taxpayers' money.
We have to talk. I mean, I've said this many times in Thailand, that you can't just go to the Ministry of Culture. You have to talk to Ministry of Education. You have to talk to Ministry of Labor. How do we have laws that support the profession of artists, right? So, France, maybe it doesn't support show per show, but there's a system where if you're not working, if you're not touring, then you get money to live during the months off. That's not political, that's policy, right? Like, so you can't just think of government as people. They are legislators as well, so you can work with them legislatively as well, not just politically. So I think when we talk political, when we talk government, we also have to look at their functions in a more rounded way.
Anyway, the reason I brought this up, because I just want to point out that like during the pandemic, interestingly, there are actually 2 productions of contemporary Thai theater which have been invited to important performing arts festival in Europe. For example, Kunsten Festival in Brussels, and also Festival d'Automne in Paris, Autumn Festival in Paris. And Sasapin has been involved with these 2 productions, and they are Forward Theaters, 3 days in May, This Song Father Used to Sing, and 4 days in September, or The Missing Comrade. I mean, not only like invitations, but like these festival, they commission like the productions as well. So Sasapin, can you tell me, I mean, like can you analyze like this? I mean, I call this, I mean, it's quite interesting, because like all of a sudden, because usually like people in Europe, when they think of Thailand, I mean, Thai performing arts, they only think of like traditional performing arts, and they only have been like exposed to like very limited few productions of contemporary theater, but now they are inviting like more and more productions from Thailand. Yes.
I think it's a combination of a couple of things. One, definitely there is a true trend, I think, or tendency for the at least the European arts world to take an increasing interest in the region, Southeast Asia itself. And I think very politically, and simply saying, it is an uncharted territory in the arts. So, pretty much if you look at this as also cultural and artistic colonization, they have probably colonized everywhere, but not really yet Southeast Asia. So this is where they're going next, and let's see how that plays out. But I think this is, in a very simple term, this is kind of what it is. But then I mean, jokingly, it can be a colonization, but also there's openness that also comes with this trend, that people are taking an actual and deep interest into to explore, and not just picking up like star names to present, but really asking, really going deeper. And this also comes with, you know, the appearances of platforms like BIPAM and other festivals in Thailand, for example, that when there are people looking, there are gateways, there are sources for people to look at or to ask from, you know, because if there is an interest, but there's nowhere to look, there's no books to read, there's no people to talk to, where do you get the information you want? So this interest in Southeast Asia comes with these, you know, blooming platforms also in the region, that these two like pretty much demand and supply kind of connect, because you can really get the information you want. And yes, I really have to credit the openness of the festivals. I think this is the time when, not just in Europe, but also in North America, I think that the directors, the generation of the directors who are, you know, leading many organizations or festivals in these countries and continents are becoming younger. So they are leading with a very different direction and vision. So and with that, they're looking for a different kind of artist too, a different kind of presentation, a different interpretation of what it means to be a citizen of each country, and how to talk about each country narratives. And I think it's also with this that this kind of rise, or this phenomenon, having two shows by Vichaya to go to these festivals, could happen. But also there's another thing that this is not out of nowhere. I would also credit this to his predecessors, Vichaya, which means these I would say like kind of progressive artists who have made it elsewhere before, but maybe not as significant as in the sense of like not so many festivals as Vichaya, but we had Thanapon in the past who have been to, you know, different festivals in Europe. And it is actually through these kind of smaller recommendations that people get to know, you know, this person and that person, and they started to understand that, oh, there's not just the star names in Thailand, and there are many other artists who are making interesting works. And but also there are more daring the festivals too. You know, this song Father used to sing, I think I can probably say it's the first, and maybe, yeah, it's probably the first contemporary Thai play original, speaking entirely in Thai, and we were always making surtitles in different languages. So that's also the courage, the bravery, and the openness of these festivals too, that now you have a direction from these festivals who would actually invest in this kind of translation works, and also even to give people context or background knowledge in order to understand these shows better, and present the show as it really was created in the context of the local home, you know, its local origin, and not to tamper with the artistic originality of the work. And I think this has to credit both ways. So for the artists, for what the previous artists have also done, all the previous producers, and also, you know, the direction of the festivals around the world too, that is now shifting to a new perspective. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, before I open the floor, I'd like to get to the issue of immersive performance, like before we forgot. And this is a question for Amitha. Last year, interestingly, as we were easing our social distancing measures, and people are slowly getting back to live performances, and all of a sudden we had a lot of immersive performance, or those that claim to be so. Okay, I remember attending an immersive performance in a restaurant, in a fine dining restaurant, in an old airplane. Okay, so I mean, I could not afford it. I mean, I got press ticket, of course, but it was quite an experience. But then like recently, I was an audience member in the so-called immersive, like musical performance, musical theater. So I mean, like, why do you think like all of a sudden like theater makers are doing this, and audiences here seem to be excited about it?
And buying tickets, like buying pretty expensive tickets to these things. I mean, I think it started even before that a little bit with full fat theater, Save for Later, but that was very much a performance made so that we can actually social distance, right? Made in a site-specific performance with audio audio walking and site-specific performance that didn't call itself immersive yet. I don't remember what it called itself, but later on, yeah, I guess immersive became this marketing tool, right? Like this marketing word. And I think I went to one that wasn't even a performance, but it calls itself I got a press ticket, or I would have been much madder if I had to pay. And a lot of people got really mad, and they even got together to sue this production. Right?
Yeah, they're pressing charge. They're taking it to the court right now. Yes.
Right, and because it was basically video, like we went in there, we just got videos. We were just there to watch videos, and there were other issues with it because I think they're in court not only with the consumers, they're in court with another company that they claim to be, or so big issue. But I think we talked about this on my podcast with Bangkok Offstage. We said that, I think you said that, we were like people just hungry for sensory experience, new experience. For so long, we were online. We were just looking at screens. And when we come out, we just want, but something that we don't want to just, I guess people don't want to just sit and look at something, right? And people want new experience. Artists want to stage things in place. And I think there's a social dimension that we haven't discussed, the social dimension of theater that we were deprived of during COVID, right? Like seeing other people, going into different spaces, talking to other people. Because two of these performances that I saw and Boit saw as well were in restaurants, right? The act of eating together with friends, the act of going to a restaurant. People also, don't forget, people don't just miss going out to see different things and having more lively visceral and sensory experience. People also missed going to restaurants, right? It's such a Thai people, I guess anywhere, people love to eat and love to go into restaurants, and people miss that. There was this one where it wasn't just going to a restaurant, it was walking in a neighborhood with a history. So yeah, I think it touched on that chord, it touched that nerve in people. That's why people wanted to go see that. And of course, the social dimension of it, of being with other people, not just looking at things, but being immersed, right? The quality of these things is another matter. But I think that's all I have to say. Like, the social dimension that we forget that we were deprived of during. And I think at the end of the day, and I realized this during the lockdown, right? Like what do I crave when it comes to art? Or in the end, it's just does the story interest you, right? It's like, is this the story I want to hear? Is this the story I want to be a part of? This is the story. And is it well told? Is it well acted? Is it well directed? I think in the end, political or not, people crave good stories. And people crave good art. So, and I'm not saying those are good art, because sometimes when you go see the show, you don't know whether it's good or not. But at the end of the day, that's what we have to keep. Like, it's interesting that you said that there's no political content. That's not exactly true. Like, some of them have, like the one, what is it called? Hope It's Mostly Sunny in Sam. Hope is Mostly Sunny in Sam. Yeah, it's not political, but it's a reflection of what people were feeling at that time. And it's a reflection of and people, not just people feeling at that time. Don't forget, with COVID, it's not just politics that matter. It was also people losing their jobs, right? People, and the sense of self, and what that does to people when people were experiencing so much loss, right? That there was, and I think when it comes to theater, I or even political theater, I don't think we should ever neglect that human or emotional dimension of things. That sometimes, and maybe because you said that it's, mostly it's not political, but at the same time, it's but even the one in the airplane restaurant, the story that was going on was a political story, like, right? Like these are people trying to get vote, coming to your table, coming to the audience going, oh, don't vote for that person because she's this, and vote for me instead. The story, the work itself didn't work very well, but there was a political element to it. But yeah, I think that's what, maybe, I don't know, maybe when we talk about immersive theater, I don't know, maybe sometimes we have to talk about, when we talk about theater, we should also talk about the emotional elements, our longing and our losses and our cravings and all of these things as well, when we talk about art.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, and I think now I'll just open like the floor for any questions from anybody, starting with Bernice.
Yes, thank you very much. I always have this privilege to ask the first question, and as a critic as well, I am very interested about the interpretation of theater works. Like sometimes artists may use metaphors or different kinds of narrative to tell their story, even though they have a message behind. Maybe they would like to use some artistic strategies to make the narratives in a way more indirectly, or it's an artistic strategy it involves our interpretation as a critics and also as a general audience. So my question is quite, sometimes I'll be very, I need to take a balance, because some of our artists, even though they use this kind of indirect narratives to tell their story, maybe they have maybe a lot of reasons of using this kind of strategy. As a critics, how to interpret the works or the messages correctly, of course, is a very delicate question, because there's no correct or incorrect, because it's an artwork. But sometimes if it involves something really controversial, or in a way that may make the artist into a trouble, as a critics, how are we going to deal with this kind of interpretation, or how to make our interpretation in a more strategic way, so as to make the balance?
I think that's the question for Amitha. And actually, after Amitha, I'd like to Sasabin to tell us about Vishaya's work as well. I mean, the work for forward theater, because he's been known for using all these metaphors and symbols in his works. Yes.
But that's the thing, right? Like, I haven't had to do that much, because, like I said, it's so decoded, and it's so coded in a way, and I don't know. I think you just figure out. Yeah, I've never asked this question for myself, because I've definitely asked, well, what can I say? I think artists, the thing is, artists have, so also teaches you, sort of gives you clue of what is said is not, and it's not said. So and I think a lot of the works address the fact that you can't say it to begin with. So I think that's what you can write about, right? So, and really, there's no other shows that address really taboo, really taboo topics as directly and as openly as Bangla Mud. The others, I feel like, oh, you can get around it. The artists are not saying it, so we're not going to say it, but we can suggest it. Yeah, I don't know. I even said at one point, after watching a play that was obviously so political and yet so coded, and I thought unnecessarily. I even started in my work, or even when I do panels like this, I even started pushing back on political artists to be like, are we that censored? Do you need to be that? Are you censoring yourself? Like, and starting, I really began to question these things, because I feel like, yeah, I feel like it's so censored in Thailand that sometimes we've gotten used to self-censorship to the point where we don't ask ourselves, or like our artists don't ask themselves when they do it. It's just automatic. I'm going to talk about politics. I'm going to do it really coded, but I'm like, are certain issues that taboo? You know, sometimes I wonder. So in a way, in my work, I started really pushing back on political theater that is a little too obscure, where I feel, and I start to question whether certain things should be that obscured. Let's just say, like, political theater has been pretty not direct for the most part.
Yeah, I understand.
And I think in terms of writing, I mean, like both Amitha and I have been writing for English language newspapers. So I think that's part of the reason we have been safe by far in our writings on political works.
Totally. I think language is a huge thing. Like, that's why I mentioned translation to begin with, that, you know, you can really hide behind foreign language. Still.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, yeah, speaking of safety, actually, that's a good point that Pavi just raised, because if you imagine that a show writes in the description that, hey, this show is about the 6th October massacre in Thai, and put that on press, on TV, what's going to happen? Of course, we're going to get arrested completely, like immediately. I think the threat is real and still there. However, the level of code, I don't know. I think I can only speak from the perspective of the creator, that I don't think it's ever the intention to code so much. It could be aesthetics, it could be style, but for what is it? I don't think, I hardly know any artist who started working with, I want to talk about this, how do I hide it? It's never really like that in the creative process. So I think it's already the aesthetics, but yes, it's true that self-censorship is so embedded and inherent in many artists already. However, I want to say that you will see change from now. I think you've already started to see some change, and honestly, the older artists are already asking themselves, because if the younger ones are speaking so outspokenly, straightforwardly, and so loud, what are we doing? And so this is already, kicking in the brains of a lot of people. So I think we will see change from now on. But from the artist's perspective, actually, I remember the moments where we were reading reviews of Vichaya's work when he was touring in Europe, for example, and we get all these different interpretations, very interestingly. And for us, also to answer Bernice's question, it's very cliche, but it's true that there's not really a right interpretation, and it would be sad if people, critics and audience alike, would be hunting for the right answer. That would make artists so sad, that we create one thing and it could only mean one thing and not 100 things for 100 people. Of course, the essence is there and already you see it. And I think especially if you are critics, you are so familiar with how this, system of aesthetics in theater work, there are core ideas that will be there. What we're excited about, what the spaces for interpretation is the ones around this core idea. So I don't think there would be a wrong answer as long as this core idea, which the artist would care so much to give you enough clues to know, and also for other audiences, because actually, yes, we want you to know what it's about. And so the interpretation is all these other colors, and we're like excited to know what color you see it as, appearing, and stuff like that. So it's fun for us to see different ideas.
And oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, sorry. One thing about interpretation was I think I mean, I think we should admit that critics are also censored in a way, and we have to learn to say things, but to say things. But the thing is, we talk about political issues through artwork, right? So whatever is given to us, that's what we have to work with, and that's what we get to say about it. And we more or less, now, don't forget, we have editors and all of that. If we work in newspapers, we still have editors kind of like, yeah, we really can't say things like that. Or, you know, or be careful, nobody wants to get you into trouble, right? So it's not clear, it's not always clear, but you have that other filter that to help you. But at the same time, I was but we'd mentioned this incident that where a very young activist just went to jail, just been, you know, charged and convicted, and went to jail for Les Majestic show, for Les Majestic, for staging this sort of fashion show, right? And I was listening to this conversation that was held by the Thai Theatre Foundation with two academics and one artist about this to talk about this this expert witness who was also an academic who offered you know, her interpretation why it violated, or why this particular fashion show at this event was talking about or was mocking the monarchy or whatever. And I just felt like this is so interesting that we're not even allowed to be honest what we really think about what that interpretation of that performance is, right? Like, in our desire to protect that young activist, we also automatically, out of just, you know, normal human kindness, to be like, to not even admit what we really think about that interpretation. So in a way, we disallow publicly our own interpretation, our honest interpretation. That's a problem.
And other interesting question is about audience reception and discussion, because you talk about a lot of examples of talking about social and political issues in the theater. And do you know about how this discussion will be able to raised or be able to aroused in a public sphere, that people, I mean the audience, will further discuss, or to really digest what the message behind, so as to make some kind of further discussion or concerns about that issue that they saw on the theater?
You mean how are they discussing after they see a performance?
Yes.
Like how the continuous discussion
maybe as any social media platforms that they allow them to further discuss what they saw on stage?
I think I see, I mean, on many like Thai theater companies Facebooks now, they love like posting audience comments like on their Facebook, and I think that's I mean, it shows like because usually Thai people, like when Amitha said that when we're on the so-called like public arena, we don't like talk openly, but when we're on our Facebook, we feel that it's private, but it's not. It's actually, it's like semi-private, right? But then again, like a lot of comments have been shared on theater companies' Facebook. If you like to elaborate on that, Sasapin.
No, same. Yeah. Discussions now really go online, and I think for us it's a two-way thing, because we also get exposure by having people talking about the show, either in both the good and the bad way. Actually, it's, you know, bad publicity is publicity anyway. So yeah, the discussion continues, and for some productions you really see debates. If people are really super engaged with the show, they would put out their opinions. There are other people who might even, interact with them within their social posts, about the shows. But how long do these conversations last? Usually only as long as the performance runs, I would say. So it's not like, okay, this sparks one topic of conversation and this topic becomes like, running on afterwards. But I think it's like the continuation doesn't come from whether or not people still keep talking about it. I think the continuation is that you see this show addressing this issue in a certain way, after a couple of months and another show discussing maybe a similar issue in a different way, and people who actually continue these theaters would see the dynamics or the development of the discussion or the creations or the ideas of the artists that they are making, so they could trace this kind of development. I think so. For me, that is the continuation, but it doesn't mean that do people keep talking about it months on end after. That hardly happens, I think. But if they see like, oh, this one play and then there's another play that, oh, they make connection, then that conversation can kind of happen. And also, I think somehow I feel from your question, Bernice, that you kind of see theater as a pretty exclusive space. I don't know about Hong Kong, but I think in Thailand, especially at this moment, I see theater not as that kind of art exclusive space, but we are, again, I think it's about conversation, and I think it's healthy for us theater makers to think of ourselves as part of the social conversations rather than being this like artist who make art and people have to come see. And so the dynamic of talking about theater is really going with the dynamics of what the society is discussing. Yeah.
This question I ask is because I'm thinking of the sometimes I mean in Hong Kong recently we of course I can understand most of our discussion go online, and of course it makes the discussion sometimes very fragmentized, and of course there's a group of people always know because of the eye of the Facebook or the YouTube, you will be always feed the same kind of information. So what I'm talking about and concerning about is the visibility of the issues that some works on stage could be able to be discussed in a public platform, even though they are not the audience from the theater, they still know what's going on in the theater. I mean, the issues that the artists are concerning about, but because of the situation, I'm not sure I mean, in Hong Kong now, it's very difficult for some social issues to be able to be visible on the press, because we have a lot of like different difficulties that encountering here now in Hong Kong. But of course, I understand that most of the discussion go online, but still online is another issues that hard to be able to found, or maybe it's still that it's another issues that we may need to take care of. I mean, as in terms of as a critics and also as an association for promoting performing arts criticism. Any other questions from our audience?
I'd like to invite Sasapin to talk about the upcoming BIPAM, because it's coming up in about 2 months, right? Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for making the space. So yeah, BIPAM is again back to organizing our in-person gathering, international gathering, and this will take place on the 22nd to 26th of March this year, and quite exciting because we're going to move our kind of festival center to the Jim Thompson Art Center, this kind of brand new, not so brand new, but new and still exciting, very beautiful venue that we will be housing our center in. It's becoming a bit more impact, and this year, because also in consideration of the COVID time and this era, which is kind of, looking like a post-COVID era, we were thinking of what would be a good reason for people to be back on our feet together again. And So what we designed for this year is that we will have the classics, which is, we have BIPAM talks, performances, 4 performances this year, networking opportunities, a little bar where you can hang out always. But also we would like to take some discussions out of the usual conference setting. So we're offering 2 walking routes, a short walk, not too long because it's very hot in Bangkok, probably cannot do too long. But we will take some of, hopefully that we can stir discussions along this walking tour. So you could do, the normal setting kind of talks, but also there will be some hints and clues and spots that we will stop at and discuss that you can kind of pick and pieces things together on your own as you walk on these 2 routes that we are offering. And also another exciting thing is that Thanapon Virunhakun, the artist that I mentioned earlier, has taken a break from being artist for a while. He's making a comeback at BIPAM 2023. And it's a co-production for the first time ever between all Southeast Asian partners, BIPAM, SIFA, the Singapore International Festival of the Arts, and also Georgetown Festival. So it's a 3-way Southeast Asian co-production in this project, which is titled Intermission by Thanapon Virunhakun. And we're really, really looking forward to this being premiered in Thailand in March. So would really love to welcome any of you who can make it and who are interested. I think we're expecting a lot of colleagues from many parts of the world. The team is now working very hard to make sure that the registration system works perfectly, and we're going to launch the registration in the next days, maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. So please look out for that, and we would really, really love to see some of you, if not all of you, very soon in March at BIPAM. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Other questions from the audience?
Last chance. Open your switch on your mic or to send your questions in the chat box.
And to connect to BIPAM, you can go to what's the website and Facebook?
Yeah, I can just write the website.
Yes,
the chat is www.bipam.org. Actually, very simple. Yeah.
Okay.
It's
BIPAM. Okay, BIPAM. Yes.
Thank you. Any final remarks from you, Pawi, and your dog?
Oh, well, yes, my dog. Okay. He has to show himself, right? Okay.
Hello.
Okay. Hello.
I think there's another norm that Zoom has brought to us, which is, showing your pets as you talk on your panels. It's very, very fashionable. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
So
there was a clip of like me and like teaching a class, and then interrupted by this guy barking on TikTok, which went like viral last year or something. I don't know.
Any final remarks from him?
Okay. I think yes. I just want to thank again our Hong Kong friend like Bernice and all the team in IATC Hong Kong, and our 2 speakers today, Amitha Amranand and Sasapin Sirivanit, who share their experience, their insight, and their thoughts on the political performance in Thailand, and also give us some info about immersive performance as well as the upcoming BIPAM. Okay.
Thank you so much. It's really good to know what's going on outside our city. And so thank you very much for our speakers, and also for Pawi's he made a lot of efforts on making this online talks visible, and also it's a good chance for us to have collaboration this time in Hong Kong here with the Thai IATC. So thank you so much for all of your participation, and as we mentioned early in the talk, that the recording of the 2 talks will be available online soon later in IATC's channel. So stay in touch with us, and This is going to be the Chinese New Year holiday soon. So,
恭喜發財。
恭喜發財. Happy Chinese New Year and stay healthy, everyone. And looking forward to meet you all soon in Hong Kong or in Bangkok. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
ขอบคุณครับ 謝謝
Yeah. Bye bye.